It was interesting to me to see the movies you did include Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and the Westerns. Did you have others you wanted to put in that you couldn't get rights to?
No, there were others that were in that we could get rights to, but in the end it just seemed too much. The Sound of Music was in there,
Oh, wow.
the great Robert Wise film, and The Great Escape. We had the scene in there, it's a scene where Richard Attenborough, the late great Richard Attenborough, and Gordon Jackson, they just have to get on this bus. They just have to get on this bus and they're gone. They make it. And the papers are good, and the German officers look at them and, yeah, very good. And as they're getting on, he goes, "Good luck," in English, to which Gordon Jackson replies, "Thank you."
I remember it well.
Oh, and then they run, and then it's all over, and then all the dominoes start to... Oh.
I think my dad wants us to leave Belfast.
What do you want?
Every night, before I go to sleep, when I say my prayers, I ask God if he'd fix it, so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm the best footballer in the world. And then I also ask him as well, that when I grow up, can I marry Catherine? Even if she loves Ronnie Boyd. But you could still see him, but you'd marry me. That's what I want.
Well, welcome to the actor's side, and today, what an actor I've got right here, and director, and writer, and producer, and everything. Have you written any new songs lately? I don't know. This is Ken Branagh. Welcome.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you.
And, of course, your latest film is, I would say, your most personal film, Belfast. Congratulations on that, which you've directed and written and produced, but don't appear in, which you've done a few films where you don't appear, but the majority of movies I would say you've directed, you have also had a role in, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the difference is sometimes instinctive and intuitive. When, for instance, playing Hercule Poirot in Murder on the Orient Express, there was something about the character who directs an investigation and is constantly auditioning people that felt like it was a very good fit if you were a director in the same place, as opposed to something like Thor, where the scale of the film was so huge that you barely had enough time and concentration to deal with just being on one side of the lens.
Would you call yourself an actor's director, since acting permeates your whole life so much here?
If you mean by that somebody who is sensitive about performance, I would say yes. I would say I was very protective about actors. From maybe the quite a simple point of view is I understand, and it's an obvious thing to say, and sometimes people don't have much sympathy for it because we are, if any of us get a chance to work, we are very, very privileged, but we get scared. Actors, it can be a very scary thing. I always use the example of when people have to do any public speaking. If you're not an actor, but you've had to make a speech at a wedding or something, right. The number of times I've talked people off the ledge who have to do that, who suddenly go, "I never want to do this ever again." Yeah. And so you're in touch with something that even if you want to be there and you want to say the thing about whatever it is, you're constantly living with that. So I think I'm an actor's director in the sense that if there's anything that I can do to remove as much of that as possible, to let them do their best work, then I do realize that has a big impact on everybody, and the people behind these cameras have a much nicer job as well if that attention has been paid.
I was talking to George Clooney at it wasn't a premiere, it was like they called it a tastemaker screening of his new film. And he said he was just so happy that he didn't have to act in this film that he just directed, as opposed to acting in those that he does. He said nothing made him happier on a set than knowing he didn't have to go in front of the camera.
Well, I do sympathize sometimes with that situation. If you are an actor-director who, aside from everything else you have to do, you often, if you're at the center of it and there's any kind of complicated makeup, you're up very, very early. I mean, you have a lot of work to do before you even get to the starting line, and sometimes that. And when it comes to Poirot, for instance, as you know, these big set pieces at the end, the denouement, he never shuts up. So it's that plus the words as well. I know I know actors. If you could give us a gene for knowing how to know the lines immediately, I think everybody would jump at it.
For sure. And speaking of Poirot, obviously Death on the Nile, I think it's been delayed its release because of COVID like so many other movies, but that's one everyone's looking forward to too. Murder on the Orient Express was a huge hit, box office hit.
It was, and Agatha Christie remains, this incredible attraction to people who love a good mystery. She is the mistress. Death on the Nile, I think, is absolutely one of her best, and she believes so. She writes about it in that way. She talks about it being something that she felt had a real degree of reality and naturalism to it. She was proud of its, it's sort of its recognition. I think she found it very human. We managed to shoot again on 70mm, but and we have a great cast. The Bond film was delayed 4 times, and so we're hoping if we come out, we're due to come out on February the 11th, 2022, worldwide on 70mm in theaters only. And if that happens, great. And I guess if COVID speaks otherwise, then we'll continue to be patient.
Yeah, and that brings me to Belfast, your film here, because there is such a love for the movie-going experience. It was very clear to me this has got to be autobiographical in some sense.
Well, yes. I mean, Almodovar talked about, and with his film Pain and Glory, something called autofiction, where this idea that it is partly based in your own experience, but in my particular case, 50 years of distance and a determination in making the film to show it through the eyes of a 9-year-old boy meant that what you recorded couldn't probably be absolutely objectively, truthfully accurate, but there would be an emotional truth to it. And in a way that was almost more important, because what I guess I was talking about was something that not only was powerfully impactful to me then, but had been haunting me ever since and was somehow unresolved. So that wasn't because it was something, an idea to be understood, it was a feeling to be processed, and I still hadn't processed it 50 years on, because it was this still hard to comprehend idea of a moment, a literal moment in your life when you sort of cross over from a child to some sort of novitiate adult, and you ain't ready for it, and it's a violent change. And to go back to what you were saying a moment ago, one of the things that I threw myself at, sort of imaginatively, to try and stabilize myself then and possibly ever since, was movies.
Yeah.
Was on the television. It was, my mum worked in a fish and chip shop, and my father, as you know from the film, was away working back and forth. So it was the kind of childminder. That's where I saw my first batch of Hollywood movies on television, all in black and white. Whether they originated in color or not, they were in black and white. Right. And then when we went to the movies, as we did as a family a lot, the explosion of color, I feel as though the 60s was such a sort of technicolor, color saturation world of widescreen entertainment that talk about blowing your mind. That blew my mind to see that. So the personal nature of it was very particular. Yeah.
And I love those scenes. You go to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in it, and you watch the faces of your family, the family in the movie, having that experience. And then that it's going to make an impact on this kid, on this 9-year-old, that he's never going to forget. I mean, that's how I related to it, because what I remember are theatrical, big experiences in theaters. I couldn't tell you the last movie that I watched on Netflix that I have that experience with. They're fine films, they're all good, but I don't have that kind of visceral memory or feeling about it. It's just different.
It is different. And it's all the things that make the imprint indelible are family with you, or friends with you, or just a big room, or the big light, or maybe the treat of some, chocolate or popcorn or something. The size of the image, we can never get away from that. It's the size of the image that is so amazing. The big moment in the movie, the car goes over the cliff. and we'd read about it and said, it's as if you go over the cliff with it. And I realized the reason you thought this, because as an audience, we all just leant forward and went, so the movie did nothing. We entirely provided the special effect. We did it, and yet we thought we'd been given something extra, just simply because we went with the point of view of the camera. And in a way, that was such a sort of simple magic, but you're never going to forget, a whole audience row doing this, and you look around and everybody's doing it because a car went over a cliff.
So Belfast now, 50 years after the age you are of Jude Hill, what a find he is as a child, as an actor who happens to be a child, I think. Why now? How tough was it to do what you wanted to do with this film, a very personal film, a memoir in some ways, even though I think he's a fictional version of you?
Yeah, it is. And in a way, we had inspiration from the Westerns, so it's Ma and Pa and Pop and Grandpa, because I couldn't remember any Western I'd ever seen where I understood anybody had a surname. Everybody was Ma and Pa. So I thought that's good enough for me. And Buddy, this I wanted him to be the friend of the audience, somebody who sort of held their hand as they walked through the story. So his name came naturally enough from that as the sort of, the everyman companion. It came out of staring into the silence of lockdown. Yeah. The silence, which was thick, no airplanes, no cars going by. I'm walking the dog, and the silence is really significant. And into my head started to come all of the sounds of the city of my birth, and particularly the one sound, because it was the spring, was the sound of bees. And this is what I had confused in this surreal moment which changed my life, when coming in to have my tea, having been out to play on a street that was the safest place I could possibly be, the sound of bees continued. I couldn't work it out until I looked at the bottom of the street, and the noise was coming from there, and it wasn't bees, it wasn't a swarm of bees, it was a rioting crowd of people. And I've known since that really, from that moment, everything about my life changed. My sense of security changed. My sense of a personal identity changed. Eventually, of course, where I lived changed. But my entire, personal trajectory changed. I don't know whether we'd still be sitting here talking to each other, Pete. In fact, maybe I would have been back there doing something different. And if you'd given me the opportunity as the 9-year-old to say yay or nay, you can stay or you can go, I'd have said stay, 100%. It was the silence of lockdown that took me to this other lockdown, where in that one weird, surreal moment of hearing bees that turned out to be rioting youngsters that smashed the glass windows of our Catholic neighbors, suddenly we, having escaped into our rooms and our houses, came out and found that literally the ground beneath our feet had been taken up. And that I always find that memory haunted me. You came out and that which you relied on, the pavement. I mean, why is the pavement going to move? The pavement's never going to move. The pavement's the pavement. Well, the pavement was gone, sand was there, and the paving stones are all up the end of the street, locking you in. So now, from utter normality and comfort and security, you have to sign in and sign out of your own street. It couldn't have been more. It's baffled me ever since. It certainly perplexed the 9-year-old who then, as I say, tried to make sense out of it with what little he knew. Football, a passion for a young lady, and crucially, the movies. And then everything that he could overhear, everything that he'd look at and overhear, half hear. What is that important conversation going on in the darkened bit of the room when I've been sent out of the room? But one was just like the beginning of lockdown and through lockdown, one was feeling this deep sense of being unsettled.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, now that I've seen the film a couple of times, but when we had, in this country, the January 6th insurrection, and we're watching on television something we could never imagine happening in our world, and certainly in our capital there, and going through that with a mob that suddenly goes out, and you came out of that, and suddenly everything's changed.
When that happened, what really struck me was, in a so-called civilized society, the rapidity, the speed, the terrifying speed at which it can all collapse when the fervor of a group, or you might call a mob, but something where human beings are possessed by an energy that they all share that is now starting not to operate with usual boundaries or restraint. Turns into something that so immediately is so anarchic, and of course, as it was here on January the 6th, so dangerous.
Exactly. It's frightening in that way. But we've seen history repeat itself in different ways here. That neighborhood, that place you grew up, I would have sworn that's where it was shot. But you recreated all of that in England, actually, didn't you?
We did. We went. We went. We were the magic of the movies at work. We went. We went, of course, to Belfast, and it became clear that we couldn't. The original hope was to do it, maybe even do it in the real place, but my half of the street's now knocked down, or there's some very nice houses down in the lower half of that street, so that wasn't there. And then trying to find streets where either it was sufficiently period and safe, either structurally safe, we couldn't find that, and then to take away the modernity of other streets and basically have that flexibility in the time of COVID. Where permissions for such things inevitably were slow moving. And then with the range of people in our cars, from 85-year-old Judi Dench down to 10-year-old Jude Hill, we knew we had to build it. And in fact, there was no stage space available. The Northern Irish film industry, incredibly packed. The English film industry packed, and they were all stopped. So there were lots of standing sets, just standing where you would otherwise have built things in Northern Ireland or in England. So we found an exhibition centre that could no longer be, putting on trade shows with cars and everything, with enormous hangar spaces, and eventually and outside hard standing, so that you could create a pop-up studio. So, and that's exactly what we did. So we were able to build the street right next to the studio in which we could do the interiors. And we went across for more of a kind of guerrilla trip to Belfast for exteriors and the graphic opening and end shots and anything else we could steal.
And in beautiful black and white. Did you have any from your financiers, any problem selling the idea you're going to make this in black and white?
Well, people always get nervous. They do get nervous, but I think there's something. I mean, it's a paradox, black and white, isn't it? Because the very phrase has people using it as if to say that it's down there in black and white. I mean, it's even more truthful. It couldn't be more real. So I wanted that because this was a film written from the heart, and it needed to be sort of based in this kind of truth. And then for colour to explode out of it on occasion, as if seeing the young man's imagination absolutely being blown apart by the influence of the movies.
How long did it take you to find Jude Hill, this kid who you were anchoring this entire movie on him, and it lives or dies on how effective that actor is?
You're saying what I think our producer said to me at the beginning, which is basically, you can't make the film if you don't find the kids. So we're going to have to. There's a roll of the dice here on the money we're spending. Because at some stage you'll have to pull it. If you really know you haven't got him, you just can't. You can't do it. So Northern Ireland being so full of film production, the infrastructure that sets casting up is now highly developed, and very quickly 300 kids had gone on tape. And then that whittled itself down over weeks and into a second month of finally a final 6. And we put him together with Lewis McCaskey, who plays his brother, and I began to see the improvisational ability that he had. He had a sort of combination of being quite a shy boy in a way, but in a way that many actors are. We give them the right circumstances and the shyness disappears, and they can be very demonstrative in whatever way. Another key thing was his ability to listen. He, as he listened to me or listened to the other actors, he had a face in repose that I think most great actors have to have, where you are happy to look at them listening or thinking. And I felt that he was very compelling in that way. I knew that the style of the film would ask us to rest on that face and to be entertained enough. And so I felt that he had that, but it was always going to be a leap of faith. And for the first 2 days, I was very concerned because we'd be doing a scene like this, and he'd be quite good, and then he'd do that. And he'd look at the camera. He couldn't not look at the camera. it was very hard to know what to do. And then by the end of day 2, and he said, "Very sorry, sir. Where would you like me to look?" I said, "Well, you could look at Judi Dench. She's. I mean, look at Judi Dench, whatever she's doing, because there'll always be something to learn then." And the truth is, the first 2 days was an interesting example with child actors. It was mainly him and mainly stuff on his own. As soon as he started to be with other people, I think the pressure fell away. He could play. He's a very in the moment kind of performer, because he's a young man, so he's very alive. He's a sponge. He's soaking everything in. And once Judy and Jamie and Katrina came along, once they were all, one of the side effects of COVID, they were all more or less living together in a bubble. They were at the same hotel.
Perfect for a family.
Family feeling came as a sort of COVID side effect. Yeah.
Which is great. Speaking of those actors, how long you've worked with Judi Dench? She's directed you. You've directed her plays, movies, and things. Was that just the easiest person to cast? Did she just say yes right away? Or
she always claims that she would say yes right away, but in fact, of course, she is. I would say she has a savage artistic judgment, and she will not do anything that she. First of all, she has to be surprised by it.
Yeah.
So she wasn't sure about this accent or this whole the world of Belfast, although she has many connections with the place, and she, it has to be a character that she hasn't sort of played before. Those are very important to her. She needs to feel the freshness of that. But once in, of course, you have great shorthand with her. Like all the greats, you don't need to say much. You need to give them a little.
She's amazing. She's done this very show with me, the actor's side, and came into our studio and just was going, "I love this. I could move in here." And she was just so excited, and you just love her. But the whole cast, Ciarán Hinds and Jamie Dornan and Katrina Balfe, on and on, they feel like a family there, and you root for them and this movie. Thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you the best of luck with it, because when you make something this personal, you want people to relate to it and see what you wanted to put on screen, and I think you have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Pete. Thank you.